Away from the crazy drama of the World Cup and some major giants stumbling at the first knockout round, we have to return to domestic football, particularly in Europe, where there's a lot of business being done between the biggest clubs in Europe. And one of the biggest names, Yann Diomande, who we spoke about a number of times since we started this podcast, has dramatically, according to reports, decided to turn down an offer to Liverpool and now looks set to a move to Paris Saint-Germain. And to discuss all that and maybe what Diomande arriving in the French capital means for the European champions, I'm joined once again by my good friend Stefan Tan from the French team. Stefan, how are you? And thanks again for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we've it's always good news for you when we have you on the podcast. It's either, discussing PSG getting to the final of the Champions League, or today discussing them potentially signing one of the young one of the most impressive young players in European football. But let's get started with that, I suppose. So I don't know what the French perspective on this would be, but in England or in the UK, Liverpool have been pursuing the signing of Diomande for a number of weeks. It seemed as though they were going to match the figure that Leipzig wanted for him. And then all of a sudden, it seems as though PSG have swooped in and convinced the player to move to France instead. How has the reporting, how has the coverage, how has the reaction been in France and among PSG supporters?
So yeah, as everybody know, Yann Diomande at just 19 years old is one of the most exciting player right now. He was one of the biggest revelation of the Bundesliga with an incredible season. And the Ivorian winger ticks every box of Luis Campos and Luis Enrique look for. He's young, he's already productive, with a huge room to grow. Yeah, I think it just shows how PSG is now one of the biggest club in the world. They just won back to back the Champions League. Now PSG has a very great attractivity from the young players. And yeah, as I said, Yann Diomande is one of the most attractive and exciting player. We see it in the World Cup with Ivory Coast. So yeah, PSG and Liverpool were fighting for this player, but even if Liverpool, I think, are proposing more money, the fact that Yann Diomande seems to choose PSG show that now the PSG are in another dimension, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to me about this deal is not just that, the European champions, so the best team in Europe, are going for one of the best young players in Europe. That's obviously something that happens all the time. But the fact that he's one of a number of young players that PSG have signed over the years, Désiré Doué, Barcola, Khvicha, and number of, defensive players, midfield players as well. And we have an article on Transfermarkt on the English domains looking at how PSG's transfer policy has changed. And there seems to be a reflection point or a moment in history where things changed, Stefan, for PSG, which was in 2023, the summer of 2023, when the club had sold Neymar, Lionel Messi had left, and perhaps most importantly, Mbappé announced that he wasn't going to sign a contract extension and he was going to move to Real Madrid. And since then, it seems as though the club have made a renewed focus to, instead of signing older players like Messi, Sergio Ramos, Buffon, you can go all the way back there, Dani Alves, etc. They've made a very clear change to signing young players. What what was the reason behind that? Did they maybe change the the people in charge of the recruitment team or the strategy, or was it just the club as a whole said, "Okay, we have to change our strategy here"?
Yeah, yeah, but as you said, we have to go back at 2023 when PSG was all about big stars near the end of the careers or already at the top. We can name a lot of players like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Mbappé, Neymar, Messi. But even with all that talent, the club never won its first Champions League, and it's important to say that it was not a failure. It was a needed step, I think. Signing a big star like this player that I mentioned helped PSG to become bigger, more respected as a club around the world, and it also raised the standard inside the club. I think without that period, PSG wouldn't have the reputation or the facilities needed to attract the best young players today. The real change came when Luis Enrique and Luis Campos arrived and rebuilt the whole system. And the goal was simple: build a team where every player works for the group, not for himself. And so now for 2.5 years, we saw that PSG has been moving away from buying big stars and instead, as you said, focusing on only young players, promising players who can grow into something special at the club. I think now the PSG didn't recruit a Ballon d'Or. They recruit young players that it can become a Ballon d'Or. Um, for the for the fact that they chose young players, I think young players you can shape him in the way you want. He doesn't come with a big ego like Messi or Neymar. He's like a blank page, ready to learn from Luis Enrique, and uh, and yeah, Luis Enrique is he's trusting young players. He's renowned to be one of the best coach in the world. So everybody wants to join PSG to play for Luis Enrique, for to play with his philosophy. And we can see we have a lot of example of young players who came at a very young age at PSG, like Nuno Mendes or even João Neves. In just 1 or 2 years, they improve a lot. So yeah, that's one of the main reason that they young players now choose PSG instead of big club, and we can say that PSG have one of the most exciting project. The average age is only 24 years old. So the PSG already won 2 Champions League. I think the project is to win more and more in the few years, and even in 3 or 4 years, the PSG team will only be 27, 28 years old. It's in football, we said that's the age of maturity. So, and now the PSG already won 2 Champions League. So yeah, for young players, it's very exciting.
Yeah,
Fantastic
absolutely.
project.
I noted in that article that during the Champions League final, the average age of both starting 11s between PSG and Arsenal was almost identical, but the average age of the PSG bench was about 5 years younger than Arsenal. So that shows how many young players they obviously have in that squad. I wanted to pick up on something you said there about Luis Campos and Luis Enrique. And, obviously, Luis Campos is in charge of recruitment and the sporting project. And obviously, everyone knows who Luis Enrique is. How vital are those two people to these two Champions League successes for PSG? Do you think PSG could have won the back-to-back Champions Leagues or European Cups if Luis Enrique wasn't there or Luis Campos wasn't there to scout and sign these players?
Yeah, these two guys are, I think, the most important people of PSG project. Luis Campos, his mission is to scout, to buy players and sell players. During the first years of the project, we saw him depensing a lot of money, but it didn't work as expected. Um, and There's a thing which is very important is the connectivity between both of them. They like each other. They love to work with each other, and um, and there's a thing in the recruitment process is the player had to want to join PSG at 100%. If the player are not willing to play for the PSG jersey or willing to really play for PSG, Luis Enrique want the players, and that's the same for Yann Diomandé. Uh, if at the end he wanted to play for Liverpool, PSG wouldn't go for him. And it's the same strategy for several years now. Players really need to want to join the PSG before the PSG go for them. Yeah, I think Luis Enrique has a key role in PSG. He's known for trusting young players even before joining PSG. At Barcelona, we saw he gave a chance for young talent from the Masia without hesitation. As a Spain coach, he made the bold choice to start with Gavi, a very young players, and he does the same. He does the same thing at PSG. Young players aren't left waiting on the bench. They play and they play with important matches. We saw it. The players last year in PSG who played the most was Warren Zaïre-Emery. Unfortunately for him, he didn't play the final, but he was one of the player who played the most. So yeah, I think these two people are so important for PSG and are one of the biggest key for PSG's success today.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And as you said, you can understand why someone like Diomande would look at all that and say, that's the perfect club for me because not only are PSG challenging for major titles, but they have a head coach who prioritizes minutes for young players. My only question, Stefan, is how does Diomande fit into this team? Because PSG have just proven that they have a squad capable of beating anyone in the world. And most importantly, they have some of the best wide players in the world, whether it's Kvaratskhelia, Désiré Doué. They have someone like Barcola who can come off the bench, as well as lots of young players in that squad as well. Even someone like Randall Kolomoani returning from loan. Okay, maybe he's not, a player that's ready or good enough for the first team, but still maybe a backup player. So there are some reports that PSG would let Diomande stay at Leipzig for a further season to develop. Do you think that is because they maybe have to make space for him? And I guess if that's the case, who do you think would have to leave PSG to make space for Diomande?
Yeah. So Yann Diomandé, he's a very skilled dribbler. He's fast and capable of insulting any defense. His profile actually looks quite similar to Bradley Barcola, even if Barcola tends to attack more depth and run in behind, which only adds the idea that Diomandé could become his natural successor on the wing. Um, Bradley Barcola find himself pushed down the pecking order now behind both Kvaratskhelia and Doué on the wing, and that bench role could push him toward an exit, as he legitimately looks for undisputed starter statues everywhere. And it will be a shame given how rare his profile is, in my opinion. But that's Luis Enrique philosophy and PSG philosophy now. Players have to be fully committed to the project, and if it's not the case, the door stays open, and it works in both way, as I said. Um, and we already have another rumor for the right wing with Marnes Akliouche from Monaco. So yeah, I think PSG they want the best young talents to dominate Europe in the next year. So if you don't want to play for PSG anymore, thanks for everything you achieve with the PSG, but there will be another player who want to play for them. And we also have the case of Ousmane Dembélé. He didn't sign a new contract yet. He's 29 years old, so PSG had to start thinking for the next few years. So yeah, it's they always want the best players. So I think Yann Diomandé could be the reason why Barcola would may leave PSG.
Who coincidentally has also been heavily linked with a move to Liverpool. So we might find this kind of carousel of players moving around Europe due to this transfer. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops and what happens. Hopefully, it hasn't gone through by the time this podcast goes live. But even still, Stefan, you've offered some fantastic insight, not only into why Diomande might want to join PSG, but also why PSG seem to be outperforming just about every other club in Europe right now, on and off the pitch. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having you back on the show next time PSG are either winning the European Cup or signing the best player in the world.
Hope so. Thank you.